night, guys. The Wolves won once again in Dallas, getting their second win in Dallas of the season. A narrow 1 point win, though. Probably could have been a 4 point win had Kyrie Irving not made that last second 40-foot three-pointer at the end of the game. But I digress. The Wolves pull off a big win, Nolan, in Dallas on national television. Wolves now improving to 23-21 on the season, still well down in the rankings in the Western Conference, down at 8th place in the Western Conference right now this season so far. What have our been our general thoughts on what we've seen from the Wolves? I know it's been very up and down. They're still trying to, it seems like, figure out how Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo fit into all this. I know Dante's injured for the foreseeable future. We'll talk about that later. But have been our general thoughts on what we've seen from the Wolves through 40 plus games of the season so far?
Yeah, it's I guess what you look at the record and it is a mixed bag, right? Like there was that I believe 23 and 21 now was after last night. So
Yep.
you're hovering around 500. You're in the playoff mix, but it's been a mixed bag. It's they've been struggling to find some chemistry. I think the one thing you do see as a positive here is the offense seems to be finding a little bit more of a rhythm. They've been finding more lineups that kind of work with Julius Randle and his drive and kick, kind of splitting up some of his minutes with Rudy. Him and Nas have seemed to be developing a lot of chemistry lately, so that's one thing that's been really positive for the Wolves. And then when you get games like you get last night from Jaden McDaniels and Mike Conley, that can really change, where the ceiling of this team is. Jaden, I believe it was his career high last night with 27. Mike looked kind of like the Mike of old with 18, 8 assists, a couple steals, playing really well defensively too. So they're going to need those guys to play kind of like they did last night. And the offense has been better. I think I did a story a little bit ago where it was like the games where they've scored at least 115. Like they had five in the last couple weeks, and before that it was like seven all season. So the offense is definitely starting to come together. But I think the biggest issue right now is that's not necessarily translating to the end of games. They've had that Memphis game; it just kind of fell apart at the end. Last night in Dallas, it looked like they were going to pull away at the beginning of the fourth quarter, got up by 12, and then kind of disaster where Nas fouls PJ Washington. He gets the and one. Then Nas picks up a tech and cuts an 8 point lead to four. And then Kyrie hits a three, and it's a 1 point game. And next thing you know, you're playing another one of these 3 point games down to the wire. But the positive sign is the offense is coming along, and it's taking longer than expected. But there's still a lot of pieces with this team. It's just not all been clicking so far. But mixed bag. I mean, that's you can't really say anything other than that at this point.
What do you guys view as the ceiling from what you've seen from 40 plus games from this team? I know, obviously, last year was an incredible season, one of the franchise's best. Obviously, well off that mark through 40 plus games. What's the ceiling for this team sitting at 8th place now in the middle of January, heading into February at this point? Only a couple months left of the regular season. What do you guys view as the ceiling, Nolan? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a playoff team, and I think it's a team that can win a playoff series, it can win some games. I don't really see right now, unless something really comes along that changes this team beating somebody like OKC, or even getting back and beating Denver again, or beating Dallas has got all kinds of injuries right now, so that it's kind of hard to tell exactly where they're going to be at. Last night, no Clay, no Lively, no Luca. But that as a healthy team is a really good team. And so some of those teams, it's hard to see the Wolves being able to knock one of them off. Especially now you're going to be long time without Dante. It's possible, but I'd say right now I'd say the ceiling is probably make the playoffs, win a series. But again, it's the halfway point. Things can change, but I just don't see the ceiling as high necessarily as it was last year.
Tony?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Nolan there. I feel like we've figured out what the floor of this team is. They're kind of clicking with a few things that they're going to be competitive in a lot of these games, and I think they can be competitive in the playoffs, but I think we still haven't seen what the ceiling can be, and that's kind of my questions when watching the team because I think it's pretty clear that it's a much different team than it was last year, and anyone from the outside is going to see that they probably have a lower ceiling, and a lot of that comes on the offensive end because Julius Randle is just a little bit less versatile than Karl Anthony Towns, and I think anyone who's watched this team would agree with that. And it is interesting though because it just seems like a trade or something is going to happen because that is just what Tim Connolly has done, and that's I think part of this discussion because it just seems like they're missing that one piece right now, and it's real easy to point towards Julius Randle, but there's a lot of other things that go into it, like the decline of Mike Conley a little bit, but we saw him. He still has that left in him every once in a while, but we just don't know how consistently he's going to be able to do that in the playoffs. And I think there's still a lot to be figured out because maybe Rob Dillingham comes on in the second half of the year, and that's an aspect to watch here. But it just seems like they're missing that one piece. And we talked about when the Towns trade happened that it's more of like extending their window and opening the door to re-signing players like Naz Reid and Nikhil Alexander Walker. Um, but I just have a lot of questions still about this team in the short term. And like Nolan said, I think they certainly can win a series in the playoffs, but NBA basketball is different in the postseason, and having Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert in your closing lineup might be tough to win series in postseason basketball.
For sure. And Tony, you kind of mentioned the next topic that I want to go to there is the trades. The idea of trading the NBA trade deadline is literally 2 weeks away now. February 6th at 2 p.m. Central Time is the trade deadline across the league. And we know that is always a busy, busy time in this league, more than any other. So, Nolan, I know we've seen a couple of trade suggestions pop up across the NBA media landscape, and we've written about them ourselves over at Timberwolves on SI. What is the possibility with the Wolves in their current cap situation, being in that second tax apron? What's the possibility of them making a big trade that can significantly shift the outlook of this season? Is it possible? Is Julius Randle kind of the centerpiece of anything that would have to happen because of his the size of his contract? What's the trade outlook looking like for this team heading into the trade deadline in 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, I think the real story is nothing really leaks from them, right? Is like
Right.
Tim Conley seems to keep things pretty under wraps. So the Karl Anthony Towns trade happens, nobody has any wind of it. So I think anything can kind of happen. We have no idea what he's talking about behind the scenes. Who knows? Something may be brewing, but I just do not see a realistic trade happening with the second apron restrictions. Everybody seems to want to trade Julius Randle, but the thing I think people aren't realizing, he still has a lot of value, and I don't see a way you're recouping his value with the restrictions you have to go under. You can't aggregate any salary in a trade. You can't take on any more salary than you're letting out. So with those kind of restrictions, that really handicaps what they'd be able to do as far as moves. And for anyone who's just like, oh yeah, let's just get rid of him for whatever, it just doesn't make sense, especially because he has been kind of part of this drive in the offensive turnaround, a lot of his ability to drive and kick when there's not the spacing issues that sometimes happen with the starting lineup when he's playing with more of the second unit. But I just don't see a realistic trade where you're getting something back for Julius Randle that makes you a lot better, that is going to raise your ceiling while all staying under the second apron. Again, maybe they have something brewing and this is just all part of the plan, try to shed salary and re-sign Nas and Nikhil. But as of right now, I just don't see much of a chance of him leaving here in the next 2 weeks before the trade deadline.
Yeah, that's always seemed like the tricky part of finding a trade partner that will be able to take the salary and not give you something that's going to set you over the amount of money you're giving up, and still find pieces that will help you out, because this Wolves team is still considered a playoff team, as you guys mentioned, still seeing them as a playoff team. You got to find a way to keep them in that hunt, and giving up Julius Randle for just pieces isn't going to do that. You're going to have to find something that can actually help you out. So it'll be certainly something to watch down the deadline. 2 weeks away, February 6th. Shifting focus here, basketball still wise though. Gophers, Tony, have rattled off 2 impressive wins, getting a win against Michigan, a ranked team. Ben Johnson's first ranked win as the Gophers head coach. Impressive win in that. Then going down to Iowa, a place they haven't won in almost 10 years, and getting a win there. What's been behind these 2 wins? How did they kind of, it seemed, turn things around? Because I know going into that Michigan game, I know you specifically wrote about some of the struggles that they've had in the tenure of Ben Johnson and everything. But it seems like things have turned around in these past 2 games where there's almost, I know it's 2 wins, so there's a little recency bias, but there's almost some optimism around the program that it doesn't feel like there's been in a while.
Yeah, I mean the Gophers basketball is a really interesting team because the fan base specifically, if you win a couple games like that, they love to hop onto the winner and be a little more optimistic. But at the start of the year, they love to pile on and say and call out the struggles. But I think the reason that they've turned it around a little bit here, it really just starts with their transfer portal additions. At the start of the year, there were 3 big ones: the 3 starters, Lakai Patterson, Femi Odakale, and Frank Mitchell kind of struggled to make the transition to a Big Ten program. And I think that showed in their record, losing to North Texas, losing to Wichita State, losing to Wake Forest, and then starting out slow in the Big Ten. But all 3 of those guys have kind of turned it around. Lakai Patterson had his best game of the season against Michigan. He was over 20 points for the first time all year. Femi Odakale had his best game of the year against Iowa. He had 18 points, shot well from the free throw line for the first time all season. And Frank Mitchell in both those games have kind of given them a little bit of offensive rebounding and that extra big man next to Dawson Garcia that they've kind of been missing. And I mean, that's really all it comes down to. That they were expecting those 3 guys to be high level starters in the Big Ten, and they weren't at the start of the year, and now they're performing like it. And that's lent them to be competitive in these games against Iowa and Michigan, and it sets up for a big game this weekend against Oregon.
You mentioned that big game against Oregon. Both of their next games are against ranked opponents, Oregon and Michigan State. Then a couple games later, Illinois also ranked. So 3 of their next 6 are against ranked opponents. It's doesn't get any easier. You still have plenty of time left for the Gophers to turn this thing around. Kind of a similar question to what we asked you guys earlier on the Wolves. With these 2 wins, has it changed your opinion on where you see or what you see this Gophers team doing for the rest of the season? There's still plenty of games left. There's still plenty of time until March 9th, the regular season finale at Rutgers. Have these 2 wins changed that? And if so, what do you think the ceiling is now for this Gophers team? Tony, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think they, to put it bluntly, I think they probably dug themselves a little too big of a hole in the non-conference with that North Texas loss at home. And if they could have stolen one of those Wichita State or Wake Forest games and maybe stolen the Ohio State game, we might be looking at a slight chance of playing in a postseason tournament. But the Big Ten schedule is interesting because, like you mentioned, they're going to have plenty of opportunities to pick up those quad 1 wins, which are the wins that build your resume to become an at-large team in these postseason tournaments. And uh, the second half of their Big Ten schedule lightens up a lot. They're going to have Nebraska, uh, Wisconsin, Rutgers, and a lot of Washington. A lot of those games are very winnable compared to the first half when they already played Michigan State. You have Michigan and Iowa, which were 2 tough games on paper looking at them. But um, I think they have a chance. What's interesting this year is only 15 of the 18 teams qualify for the Big Ten tournament. And I think now they have a path to qualifying. After their 0-6 start to Big Ten play, that looked really tough. But with the second half of the schedule lightening up, I think that's, I guess, the ceiling for this team that they play in the Big Ten tournament. I it's the postseason's a whole nother discussion beyond that because there's the NIT is different this year, and then there's another tournament called like the Crown Challenge, hosted by like Fox Sports, but that's a whole nother discussion for a different day. But they're building momentum right now, and I think they just got to take it game by game and don't look at that stuff because the start of the year was so bad. And the only thing you can correct those struggles with is winning basketball games, and that's what they're doing right now.
Nolan?
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with really any of that. I don't think, that the NCAA tournament's out. The NIT, I don't know the qualification rules per se. If they rattle off some ranked wins here, maybe they could sneak into there. But yeah, I think basically you're looking at this point, you're going to try to get into the Big Ten tournament, and if you're lucky and make some noise there or something. But I don't, yeah, I don't think this has radically changed their outlook by any means, just because it has been such a tough lead up to this point where you get these wins.
So then, last question of the day, kind of throwing this on you guys at the last second, like I like to do. How many wins? How many more wins do you guys see this team pulling off from the rest of the season? Pull up the schedules if you must. How many more wins do you guys see? Nolan or Tony? I'll start with you, then Nolan.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like I mentioned, the Oregon game this weekend is pretty interesting. Oregon's one of the better teams in the Big Ten, and that should be the biggest game at the barn this year. But winning 3 games in a row in the quad one category would be really impressive. So I think they probably lose there. And then Michigan State on the road's tough. But then you got Washington at home, Penn State on the road, and then Illinois at home, LA road trip against USC, UCLA, Penn State at home. Just I guess looking quick, I'd say they win 4 more Big Ten games, maybe 5, honestly. And then at that point, you're looking at a 7-13 record in the Big Ten, and a lot of Gophers fans might not like this, but then that's an interesting discussion looking to the 2025-26 season and what Ben Johnson can build off of. They have 3 pretty talented high school recruits coming in, and then you have Isaac Osma returning. So that's pretty far down the road, but it's an interesting outlook here once you start reeling off a couple Big Ten wins.
Nolan?
Yeah, I think you got, 4, 5, 6 maybe. I don't think you're going to go and stun Michigan State or something like that, but I think they can. I think they can be competitive. You got a game against Wisconsin towards the end of the year. You never know; those are always competitive rivalry kind of games. And the one thing that you have to say about this Gophers team with under Ben Johnson is, even though they've kind of routinely been not as talented as a lot of these Big Ten teams, they do compete, and they play really hard against some really good teams. So I could see them winning 5, 6 games, but I don't see against the really good teams. I don't see like them upsetting Michigan State or anything like that.
Yeah, the nice thing for the Gophers is that yes, they've right now at the moment they've got four ranked opponents left on the schedule, and 3 of those 4 are at the barn. So home court advantage if you want to try and spin it that way. Although it's you can try and do that if you want. But good stuff from you guys today. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Do go read all of their work at Vikings, Timberwolves, Gophers, and Twins on SI. And be sure to hit subscribe to the YouTube channel here. The Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here on the channel. We'll talk to you again tomorrow with another topic across Minnesota sports.